The morning sun was slow and warm over the quiet fields of Marcus Reed's ranch. The sky looked soft like a wide blue blanket, and the air was fresh enough that a person could feel it in their chest. Marcus stepped out of his small wooden house with a gentle smile. He always loved this time of day. It was the only moment when the world felt silent, kind, and calm. Marcus was a tall black man with strong shoulders and a patient heart. He lived alone, but he never felt lonely. His horses were his friends. His land was his partner. His animals, plants, and fields were the pieces of his life that kept him grounded. Every morning, before the world could trouble him, he walked through his ranch like a king walking through his small, peaceful kingdom. He started with feeding his horses. They recognized the sound of his boots on the dirt and came running to him with soft whinnies. Marcus laughed softly and rubbed their necks one by one. "You all behave better than the people in town," he said gently, as if the horses could understand. Maybe they did. Maybe that was why they stayed close to him. After feeding them, he walked to the vegetable patch behind the barn. He checked the soil with his fingers, feeling its warmth. It was good soil, healthy and dark. Everything he planted here grew without trouble. Tomatoes, onions, peppers, and potato, simple things. But enough for him. This ranch had been his dream since he was young. He had worked hard for it, extra shifts, odd jobs, long nights, and longer mornings. When he finally bought the land years ago, he promised himself something: "I will build a life here, and no one will ever take it away from me." And he kept that promise. For years, he lived peacefully on the edge of the neighborhood. The houses around him were modern and expensive. Built under a homeowners association, people who cared too much about rules and too little about kindness. But Marcus kept his distance. They lived in their world. He lived in his. The ranch was older and didn't match their style, but it stood on land that was his by right. He never bothered them. He never asked for anything. He lived simply, quietly, and respectfully. Sometimes neighbors waved. Sometimes they didn't. Marcus didn't care either way. He was happy with the silence and the space. But the HOA, they always kept an eye on him. They didn't like that his truck was old. They didn't like that his fence was wooden instead of metal. They didn't like that his ranch didn't fit their perfect community look. But for a long time, they didn't say much. They only sent a letter once a year asking him to join HOA meetings, which Marcus always ignored with a small smile. He knew he didn't need them, and he believed they didn't need him. But he was wrong. What the HOA didn't know, or forgot, was that the water lines for half the neighborhood passed through his land. Years ago, long before the new houses came, the developer had asked Marcus's permission to install those pipes. Marcus agreed, but only after signing a contract that protected his rights. The HOA had never bothered to read it. They thought Marcus was just a quiet ranch owner, with simple dreams they did not know. He held more power than they imagined. Life stayed calm until one small moment changed the story. On a soft Monday morning, after checking his crops, Marcus heard a car slow down outside his gate. He looked up. A black SUV with the HOA symbol stopped on the road. Two people stepped out, holding clippers. At first, Marcus thought they were here for something simple, maybe a question, maybe a small complaint. Nothing serious, but he didn't know. This was the beginning of something big, something that would shake his peaceful world, something that would push him to a point he never wanted to reach, and soon. The quiet ranch would no longer be quiet. The two HOA members stood outside. Marcus's gate like they were entering a battlefield instead of a peaceful ranch. One was a thin woman with sharp eyes and a stiff walk. Her name was Mrs. Callahan, the HOA president. The other was a short man with a nervous smile named Mr. Blake, the vice president who always looked like he wanted to be somewhere else. Marcus wiped his hands on his jeans and walked toward them slowly. "Morning," he said in his calm voice. Mrs. Callahan didn't smile. She looked at his ranch as if it were a mess she wanted to sweep away. "Mr. Reed," she said, adjusting her glasses, "we need to discuss several violations." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Violations? Of what?" She pulled out a folder thick with papers. The wind rustled the edges, almost snatching them from her hand. "Of HOA community standards," she answered firmly. Marcus crossed his arms but kept a polite tone. "Ma'am, you know I'm not part of the HOA." "That is correct," she said quickly. "But your property borders the HOA community. Anything that affects community appearance still concerns us." Mr. Blake stepped forward, trying to sound friendly. "We just want everything to look uniform, you know? Clean and modern." Marcus didn't reply. He simply waited. Mrs. Callahan cleared her throat and began reading from her list. "First, your wooden fence is not approved. It must match the metal or white vinyl used in the neighborhood." Marcus looked at the fence he had built with his own hands years ago. It was strong, clean, and sturdy. "There was nothing wrong with it," she continued. "Second, your truck. It's a bit old. Vehicles in view of the community must be newer than 15 years. Out. My truck works fine." "That is not the point," she snapped. Mr. Blake cut in softly. "It's just for visual harmony." "Third," she said, flipping another page, "your barn is too tall compared to community guidelines, and your crops may attract animals. That is considered a pest risk." Marcus finally spoke. His voice was firm but controlled. "This is a ranch. Of course, animals come. That's nature." Mrs. Callahan didn't like his answer. She closed the folder sharply. "You have 30 days to make the necessary changes," she said. Marcus took a slow breath. "And what if I don't?" She gave a thin smile. "Then we will take further action." The SUV drove away, leaving dust in the air. Marcus stood alone at the gate, feeling something heavy forming inside his chest. It wasn't fear. It was a quiet warning. A feeling that this was not the end. It was the beginning. Over the next week, the HOA complaints grew like weeds. Letters arrived in his mailbox almost every day. Some were ridiculous. "Your horse is visible from the road. Your hay storage looks unorganized. Your wind chime is too loud. Your porch light is the wrong shade of yellow." Marcus read them calmly. But each letter carried the same message. "We want you gone." He tried to ignore it. He tried to continue his peaceful routine, but the feeling would not go away. Neighbors began acting differently too. People who once waved at him now avoided eye contact. Some even hurried inside their houses when Marcus walked by, as if being friendly with him was suddenly a crime. Rumors started whispering through the community. "His ranch lowers our property values. He doesn't belong here. Doesn't follow the community look. He's different." Marcus pretended not to hear, but the words hit quietly, like small stones thrown from a distance. One evening, while feeding his horses, he saw a small group of neighbors standing together and pointing at his barn. When he walked toward them, they scattered instantly. It was clear the HOA wasn't just attacking his ranch. They were turning people against him. Still, Marcus kept his promise to himself. "I will not fight unless they force me." But he could feel the force coming. He could feel the storm building. And soon, the first lightning strike arrived. One morning, before sunrise, Marcus stepped outside and saw a big white paper nailed to his front gate. The bold letters shook him for the first time. 72-hour notice. Sell your property. The peace he protected for years was gone. Marcus stared at the white paper on his gate as if it were something unreal, something dropped from another world. The early morning light made the bold black letters shine too clearly. 72-hour notice. Sell your property immediately. The first time in years, the ranch did not feel peaceful. The wind was still, the birds were quiet, and even the horses seemed uneasy. It was as if the entire land knew something dangerous had stepped onto it. Marcus pulled the paper from the gate slowly. The nails squeaked against the wood, a sound sharp enough to echo in the silent morning. His hands were steady, but inside, a small flame of anger started to burn. He read the notice again, word by word, refusing to believe it. You must sell your property within 72 hours due to ongoing violations, failure to meet community standards, and disruption of neighborhood harmony. Marcus let out a long breath. Disruption of harmony, he repeated softly. Harmony for who? Before he could think more, he heard a car approaching. The same black SUV stopped in front of his gate. Mrs. Callahan and Mr. Blake stepped out again, this time with stiff confidence. Like soldiers marching with victory already in their hands, Mrs. Callahan didn't wait for him to speak. "You have the notice?" "I see," she said. "Good. That saves us time." Marcus looked straight at her. "You expect me to sell my ranch in 72 hours? "It is not an expectation," she replied coldly. "It is a requirement," Mr. Blake added nervously. "We don't want conflict, Mr. Reed. We just want everything to be orderly." Marcus held the paper up. "You think this is order?" Mrs. Callahan ignored the question. She spoke slowly, as if reading from a script. "The HOA has discussed this matter for weeks. Your property is not compatible with the image of the community. Your animals, your buildings, even your old truck, they do not match our standards. So it is better for everyone if you sell." "And where do you expect me to go?" Marcus asked. "That is not our concern," she replied without hesitation. Marcus felt something shift inside him, then not fear, not sadness, but a deep calm. A calm so strong it made Mrs. Callahan step back slightly even though he hadn't moved. "Why 72 hours?" he asked. "Because," she said, lifting her chin, "we want this resolved quickly. If you refuse, we will take legal action. And trust me, you do not want a legal fight against the HOA." Mr. Blake nodded helplessly. "It's better to cooperate. It will make everything easier." Marcus folded the notice slowly and placed it in his back pocket. He walked closer to them, not threatening, just steady. "You believe you have power over me," he said softly. Mrs. Callahan stiffened. "We do." Marcus tilted his head. "Are you sure?" A shadow of confusion crossed her face. But she didn't answer. The HOA members returned to their SUV, acting as if the problem was already solved. But as they drove away, Marcus watched them with a calm expression that hid something new, something determined, something sharp. The moment they were gone, he went to his barn and sat on a wooden stool. He looked at the large map pinned on the wall, the old land survey papers he had stored for years. Faded lines showed the boundaries of his property. And beneath those lines, drawn faintly in blue ink, were the water and utility pipes running straight under his land. Pipes the HOA desperately needed. He remembered the agreement he signed long ago. The signatures, the clauses, the rent the HOA paid him every year for access. A contract they had obviously forgotten. Marcus stood up slowly, his anger turning into strategy, his frustration turning into power, his silence turning into strength. For years, he avoided conflict. For years, he stayed calm. But now, they had stepped on the one thing he loved more than anything, his land. And Marcus Reed was not a man who surrendered land. He walked outside and looked at his ranch, the fields, the horses, the barn, the home he built with his own hands. Then he whispered to himself, "If they want to fight, I won't start it with anger. I'll start it with rent." The 72-hour countdown had begun. But what the HOA didn't know was that their own time was running out too. Marcus spent the morning sitting at his kitchen table with the old contract open in front of him. The paper was yellow from age, the ink faded, but every word was still clear. He traced the signatures with his finger, his own name, the name of the land developer, and the bold stamp of approval from the local authorities. This contract was not just paper. It was armor. It was protection. And now, it was power. Years ago, when the neighborhood was still empty land, the developer had approached Marcus politely. They needed a place to run the water and utility pipes for the future houses. Without Marcus's permission, the project could not continue. Marcus had agreed, but only with one condition. "As long as I live here, you will pay rent for access. And you will respect my land." The developer, desperate to continue building, signed immediately. Later, when the HOA took over, they inherited the agreement, but they never bothered to read it. They only saw Marcus as an outsider, a man living on land they wanted to control. They forgot the truth, but Marcus never forgot. And now, he read every line again with slow, careful eyes. The contract said the HOA must pay him yearly for the pipes under his land. The contract said they could not interfere with his ranch operations. The contract said eviction notices were invalid unless approved by him. The contract said something even stronger. Any attempt to force the landowner to vacate the property will double the rental fee. Marcus smiled, not out of joy, but out of justice. They had tried to push him out. They had delivered a 72-hour notice, and by doing that, they had triggered their own punishment. But Marcus did not rush. He knew patience was his greatest strength. He spent the next hour walking around his ranch, touching the wooden fences, checking the horses, letting the cool morning air clear his thoughts. He did not want revenge out of anger. He wanted fairness. He wanted respect. And this time, he would not stay silent as he walked past the well. He noticed something small to HOA members standing far away, watching his ranch through binoculars. They quickly lowered them when Marcus looked their way. They pretended to check something on their phone and walked off awkwardly. Marcus shook his head gently. "So now, they're spying," he murmured. "Interesting." Back inside, he made a strong decision. He folded the old contract carefully, put it in a thick envelope, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He grabbed his keys and stepped outside. His old truck groaned to life, but to Marcus, that sound was perfect, honest, and strong, just like him. He drove into the neighborhood. Every passing house shining with modern walls and perfect lawns. People stood outside watering plants or washing cars, but when they saw Marcus, they quickly looked away. Some whispered, some crossed their arms. Some even stepped inside their homes. Marcus didn't slow down. He didn't need their approval. He needed an office, the HOA office. The building was small, clean, and painted in a color that looked expensive for no reason. Marcus parked his truck in front, ignoring the stares from two board members standing by the door. He walked in. Inside, the air smelled like perfume and paperwork. Mrs. Callahan sat behind a glass desk, typing something fast and angrily. When she looked up and saw Marcus, her face tightened. "You again?" she said with no welcome in her voice. "If you're here to discuss the notice, the answer is the same. 72 hours. Marcus didn't respond to her tone. He placed the envelope gently on the desk. "I'm here," he said calmly, "to remind you of something you forgot." She frowned. "What is this?" "Your agreement with me," Marcus answered. "Signed before the first house here even existed." She tried to laugh. "We don't have any." But when she opened the envelope, the color drained from her face. Page after page, her eyes widened. She flipped through faster, her breathing changing. It was all there. Legally binding, unbreakable. Mr. Blake leaned over her shoulder and whispered, frightened, "This is bad. Really bad." Mrs. Callahan swallowed hard. This can't be right." Marcus looked at her straight and said softly, "You thought you had the power. But your entire neighborhood depends on my land." For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then Marcus added, "And because you tried to force me out. The rent doesn't double. It triples now." The HOA had awakened the wrong man. The silence inside the HOA office felt heavy. It's almost like the air had turned solid. Mrs. Callahan kept flipping through the old contract, her fingers shaking slightly. Every page was another piece of truth she did not want to face. Every signature was a reminder that the power she believed she had was never really hers. Marcus stood calmly in front of the desk, hands resting in his pockets as if he were discussing something simple, something ordinary. But this was not ordinary. This was the day everything changed. Mr. Blake leaned closer to the contract, whispering nervously, "It's all real. The agreement, the rent increase, even the penalties. It's all legal." Mrs. Callahan finally looked up, her voice weak but still trying to stay firm. "This contract is old. It can't still be valid." Marcus shook his head slowly. "It was renewed every year. I have proof of payment receipts. You forgot about it." "I didn't." He reached into his jacket and placed another small envelope on the desk. Inside were 8 years' worth of receipts, neatly arranged, dated, and signed by the HOA treasurer. Proof that they had paid him rent every year without thinking twice. Mrs. Callahan stared at the papers as if they were poison. Behind her, a framed photo of the HOA board hung on the wall, all smiling, all proud, all completely unaware that the very land they controlled so strictly was actually renting space from the man they wanted to remove. Marcus stepped closer. You gave me a 72-hour notice. The contract says any attempt to force me out increases the rent by 3 times, starting today. Mr. Blake rubbed his forehead. 3 times? That's more than the HOA has in emergency funds. Marcus nodded calmly. I know. Mrs. Callahan tried to straighten her posture. We can fight this. We can take this to court. Marcus spoke softly, but his words carried weight. You can try. But while you fight in court, I have the legal right to shut off access to the water lines. Without my signature, you can't run repairs. You can't open trenches. You can't touch a single pipe under my land. Her eyes widened. You would cut off water to the whole community? Marcus shook his head again. I don't have to. The contract says if you break the agreement, I only need to place a temporary lock on the access point. The city will handle the rest. They won't blame me, they'll blame you. The truth settled on them like a heavy blanket. Marcus didn't threaten them with violence. He threatened them with paperwork law, their own signatures, and that made it far more dangerous. Mrs. Callahan finally spoke, her voice thin. What do you want from us? Marcus looked around the office, slowly the polished floors, the bright paintings, the shiny awards for best managed community. Then his eyes returned to her. I want respect, he said simply. Mr. Blake nodded immediately. Yes, of course. You deserve that, Marcus continued. I want you to stop sending letters. Stop harassing me, acting like my ranch is a problem. Mrs. Callahan clenched her jaw, but said nothing. And, Marcus added, I want the new rent agreement signed today. Mrs. Callahan whispered. Today? Yes, Marcus replied. Because my 72 hours end soon, so do yours. She looked at Mr. Blake for help, but he only lifted his hands helplessly. We don't have a choice, he whispered. If we don't agree, the neighborhood loses water. Residents will destroy us. Mrs. Callahan swallowed hard. Her pride was breaking piece by piece. Marcus placed a fresh contract on the table. The new rent was written clearly triple the old amount, plus additional fees for attempted eviction. Sign, Marcus said quietly. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, painfully, Mrs. Callahan picked up the pen. Her hand trembled as she signed her name, knowing she was sealing the HOA's defeat. When she finished, Marcus picked up the contract, folded it, and slid it into his jacket. Without anger, without gloating, without raising his voice, he simply said, Now, you leave me alone. My ranch is mine, and you will never try to take it again. He turned and walked out, leaving the HOA office frozen in shock. But outside, the story was just beginning. Because by evening, the entire neighborhood would know what he had done, and the HOA would face a storm of their own making. When Marcus stepped out of the HOA office, the sun was bright in the sky, but something in the air had changed. It felt sharper, more awake, as if the neighborhood itself knew a shift had taken place, one that could not be undone. He walked calmly to his old truck, climbed in, and drove home with steady hands. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He simply breathed long and deep, letting the tension of the last few days slowly fall away. But the neighborhood was not calm. Rumors spread faster than fire on dry grass. By afternoon, everyone knew something had happened at the HOA office. People whispered in driveways. They talked in low voices near mailboxes. They stared at Marcus's ranch with wide, confused eyes. Some homeowners demanded answers. What did he do? Why is the HOA in panic mode? Is it true the water lines are on his land? Did he really triple the rent? The board members tried to hide everything, but fear does not stay hidden. It leaks out through faces, through nervous hands, through rushed meetings in parking lots. By evening, crowd gathered outside the HOA office, not angry at Marcus, but angry at the board. One man shouted, "Why did you provoke him?" A woman added, "We depend on those water lines." "What were you thinking?" Another yelled, "Fix this mess or resign." Mrs. Callahan stood at the window and sighed. watching the crowd grow. The pressure of their anger pressed against the glass like a storm. She knew the truth. The board had lost control. Everything they had tried to hide was now exposed. Meanwhile, Marcus sat in his barn, repairing a loose saddle strap. The horses moved softly around him. Their quiet breathing was the only sound he needed to feel at peace again. After hours of shouting and arguments, Marcus heard footsteps outside. He stepped out of the barn. He saw Mr. Blake standing nervously near the gate. "Evening," Marcus said calmly. Mr. Blake wiped sweat from his forehead. I came to apologize. On behalf of the HOA, we were wrong." Marcus didn't respond. We waited. "We should never have pushed you," Blake continued. "We forgot the contract. We forgot your rights. We forgot your humanity." He sighed. "The community is furious with us. Some board members are stepping down tonight." Marcus looked at him quietly, then asked, "And you? Are you stepping down too?" Mr. Blake shook his head. "No, I want to stay, but I want to change things. Not just for the HOA, but for everyone here." Marcus appreciated the honesty. He nodded once, then said, "Respect doesn't need meetings, Blake. It needs action." Blake nodded quickly. "You have my word." He left after that, walking away with slow steps, as if carrying the weight of the whole neighborhood on his shoulders. The next morning, the ranch felt peaceful again. The sun rose the same way it always had. The horses whinnied softly. The fields shone under the golden light. But something was different. A letter sat in Marcus's mailbox this time, not from the HOA, but from the residents themselves. Handwritten signatures filled a single page. Message at the top read, "We stand with you. Thank you for protecting the community even when we did not protect you." Marcus folded the letter carefully and placed it on his kitchen table. Later that evening, a few neighbors walked up to his gate, cautious but sincere. They apologized for staying silent. They apologized for believing rumors. They apologized for their fear. Marcus accepted their words with a calm nod. He didn't hold grudges. The land had taught him that bitterness poisons the soil. Forgiveness keeps it fertile, as the sun set. Behind the hills, Marcus walked along his fence with quiet pride. He had protected his home not with fists, but with facts. Not with threats, but with truth. He had stood alone and still went not for revenge, but for justice. He paused near the gate, looking at the wide land he loved. The wind carried a soft whisper through the grass. Home is not given. Home is defended. Marcus smiled gently. His ranch was safe. His peace was restored. And the HOA would never try to push him again, because now he finally understood. The quiet man at the edge of the community was stronger than all their rules combined. And he always had been.